All right. We are going to go ahead and get started in this room. This is the last presentation for the day, and then we'll head over to the keynote in the main area. I am very, very happy to introduce Dean, who is going to be wrapping up a lot of these conversations and topics that have been happening in this room. He is going to be having some good thoughts and conversations around why soft skills are kind of a multiplier and important for all of us. Dean?
All right, thanks everyone. Again, Dean Heltemes. I am here largely representing Metro State University, of where I am a teacher of the certificate program. If any of you are interested in actually learning how to apply business architecture, not just the concepts, the map building, Metro's got a great program. I'll have a few screenshots at the end that you can take of, or come and see me afterwards and we'll talk. So. In my day job, I work at Ameriprise Financial. I've been there about 7.5 years. I lead a business architecture team there. And prior to that, like half the room, worked at Cargill for a long time. So, all right. So nothing controversial here. So if you go out to the Business Architecture Guild and try to look at what is their pitch, what is business architecture all about? It starts with something that I think we've all seen and heard, and there's been plenty of studies on in the past, but the biggest problem right now is executing strategy. That's been for a long time. It's not for lack of creating great new strategies. It's just most companies' inability to successfully deliver on the ones they have and to pivot and re-deliver on the next one, and so on and so on. We've all worked at companies that are really good at that, and we've worked at some who are really bad at that. And as an architect, it is incredibly frustrating when you spend years building this grand plan for something, goes into execution mode, and then you watch them drive it into the wall and shut the whole thing down over the course of 2 years, right? Anyone had that happen before? Well, that is the life of an architect, right? That unfortunately is what you're signing up for here. So we know there's a problem there, and of course, what are we selling? We're selling business architecture is the solution for all of this, and that's why we're here. This is where this all started, and I honestly, truly believe this. We've been doing this for a long time. I'd say the first time I was doing anything close to business architecture was around 2013. Didn't know that's what it was called. Over the coming years, then people started calling it that, and here we are today. And so, yes, adoption of business architecture absolutely accelerates things and gives you a better chance of success. But the common misnomer is, if I learn how to make maps, right? If I learn how to build an awesome capability model and I show everybody this great stuff I've built, that magic will ensue. And I think what we all probably have seen in our own lives is conveying that information in an eloquent way to the various business stakeholders you work with is the problem, right? And you can be the best business architect in the world, but if you can't figure out a way to relate to, whether it's your CEO, your board members, your senior directors of various functions, nobody cares about your business architecture. And so when I was asked to say, hey, can you come up with something for a soft skills track? I'm like, absolutely, can I? So I'm going to take a little bit off of the plate of that Tim started, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into a few different areas. But first, let's start with the term, right? There's actually quite a bit written about, we got to get rid of this word for many, many, many years. I don't really care what it's called, but I think just the nature of the term soft makes it sound less important, right, than hard skills, which might be AI. Ooh, yeah, I gotta go learn that. So I'd say, I found these terms being used all over the place, from Harvard Business Review to Forbes to Deloitte. So a lot of different companies pick different terms. I don't care. I'm going to interchangeably use these throughout the entire session. So see if you can keep up. I don't even remember what I used on what page. So, all right, how important is it? At the bottom of here is an excellent article that you're going to want to go read after this. It came out just a few months ago from Harvard Business Review, and it was all about soft skills and why they matter more now than ever. Okay, and so I'll have a few themes from that article in here, but I'm going to start with why you really need to care about soft skills, because we've all been told that our entire life, right? We kind of know that's important. What this tells you is people who have a good, broad understanding of soft skills, one of the secret sauce things that they have is their ability to learn tends to be faster than other people. And if you think about the level of change we're going through right now, and how many times you've been asked to pivot from strategy A to strategy B to priority C, right? Your ability to go into a new environment and learn something and move on is absolutely critical, or you get left behind. And so that broad base of soft skills really does help you to learn faster. And by the way, they surveyed, I can't remember, tens of millions of job transitions. They literally went over a 5-year period, looked at maybe it was like 70 million job transitions, and kind of followed what happened. And so that's where this data came from. The second one is that people who have a broad array of soft skills get paid more. All right, so now do I have your attention? And then finally, you advance more, right? So this idea of career resilience as things change, your ability to bounce between different jobs, and your ability to move up the stack, right? So it's really nice to have some actual detailed data to support, I think, what we all know, which is this stuff really matters. And even more importantly, where you end your career is largely based on this topic. And so as they looked at, senior folks, executives, they found that it's in many ways largely determined by your mastery of soft skills. Okay. All right. That's why we care. You can make more money, you advance your career, you're happier, everybody's wonderful. Okay. All right, so what are we talking about for soft skills? There's a lot here, and so I'm certainly not going to try to boil the ocean and hit all of them, but there are 4 that kind of jumped out at me. We're going to start with emotional intelligence. How many people in here have been through an emotional intelligence class, an assessment, read a giant book? Okay, it's not new. It's been around for a while. Probably, I don't know, 15 to 20 years ago, it became kind of this thing, right? And why? Because again, it shows that most executives have great emotional intelligence, right? So back to that supporting that idea of the farther you go, the more you're going to need those types of skills. Communication and facilitation skills, that is the bread and butter of a business architect. And so we'll definitely spend some time on that. Influence and persuasion, there have been some other speakers talking about this. I'll hit on a couple fun areas on that one. And then adaptability. Your ability to move as priorities change. All right, let's talk about emotional intelligence. Again, since most of you have had at least a base or core set of knowledge in this one, I'll just kind of do a briefing for you and kind of a reminder. So it starts with your ability to understand your own emotions. How am I being perceived? Right? What do I do with that information? Right? How do I react based on how I'm being perceived? And then how good are you at reading other people's emotions and then taking the appropriate action based on that? That's what it is in a nutshell. And again, just another article and another statement around how important emotional intelligence is coupled with technical skills. Nobody's saying you shouldn't have technical skills. They're just saying, again, that'll only get you so far, but to apply that, you're really going to need to know this stuff. All right, let's hit each one of these in with just a couple quick examples. So self-awareness. I don't know anyone who would claim they are not self-aware, right? That's the problem, is everyone thinks they are, right? But I'll give a few examples over my career of leading people where I've had to tell people that they're not self-aware, right? Have you ever been in a meeting with that one person who dominates every single conversation and instantly your mind goes to, when will they stop talking, right? They're clearly not self-aware, or if they are, they don't care, which is another problem, okay? So another example is someone who says the same phrase over and over and over again, right? I literally had this one recently where I'm like, okay, I've started counting. And in that last hour presentation, you said this single phrase 24 times. And they're like, what? And then they started listening to recordings. And guess what? Within 1 year, it's gone. They've been doing this for most of their career and they got that out of their vocabulary. So best example is I'm in a meeting, I'm having a conversation, and you start to tense up, you start to get annoyed, you start to like, these people are all idiots, I know more than they do. Recognizing that before you move to the next one, which is, now what do I do with that? Expressing your emotions at the right time and right place, right? I think we all struggle with that in both our personal and maybe more personal lives, but also in our business lives. So the idea there is now the time to introduce some conflict, start challenging some ideas, saying things like, you're wrong and here's why? Or are you saying that from a perspective of frustration, and maybe you do need some more time to kind of think through what they're trying to get across, and then maybe come back the next day? The old kind of let's sleep on it. So sometimes it is absolutely appropriate to dive right in and stop some madness, and we all do that every once in a while too. But I think more often than not, that idea of let that simmer for a little bit, and then I'll come back and maybe address that offline, right? Versus maybe in a meeting setting. So that's an example of self-management. Social awareness. Most of the times this is talked about as empathy, understanding how other people are feeling, right? That one can be very difficult, especially with new people, right? Especially if you're building new relationships with people, you can't assume just by seeing them, looking at them, that it means something. But at the same time, sometimes it's very easy to tell when Bill is getting very, very frustrated. And if you know Bill very well and you know how easily he gets frustrated, you may need to help coach Bill on, again, when and how, right, to approach that. And then finally, using emotions to interact with others and build relationships, social skills, right? The idea of after that meeting, you're like, okay, these people don't know what's going on. They're not listening to me. I'm going to start setting up some regular one-on-ones. I'm going to build some relationships with them, start to socialize, build some trust, right? So there's 4 quick examples of just running through emotional intelligence. That last one I hit is arguably the most important one, which is a bummer for all the introverts of the world. I hate to say it, but social skills came out in that study as the most important, right? Of all of the soft skills. Your ability to collaborate, your ability to build relationships, which in the end builds trust, is probably the #1 soft skill for your ability to progress in your career. So if you don't like doing it, maybe you need to think a little bit about how you get going after that one. Some watch areas. So a couple on here I particularly like. The person who always finds something wrong with everything, right? So that one person in the room, often an architect from some discipline, who no matter what comes out, they will poke 15 holes in it the very first time it comes up, right? I would say that is a bit of a self-awareness problem. Do they know they come off that way? Quite often, if they're experienced, they do, and they just need some help sometimes toning that down. Or you might have to strategically decide who you invite to what meetings and how you maybe manage those situations. Lack of acknowledgement of realities. Oh my gosh, this is my favorite one. It's like you might have just spent the last week talking about the situation right now in the business, and you're not growing at the pace you're supposed to be growing, and oh my gosh, all hands on deck, we got to go this direction. And then somebody says, yeah, but, and then they bring up the same thing you've been working on for the past 6 months, and you're like, what is going on? So again, that's a very difficult one, right? But getting people to understand achieving business outcomes is not a leader's problem. It's all of our problems, right? And so quite often architects sometimes will say, I built my architecture, good luck with that. Or a designer says, I've designed something for this, that looks great, right? Good luck with the rest of it. Or I need to spend 6 more weeks working on this to make it better. But you're bleeding cash and your customers are screaming, right? That's not just a manager's problem, right? And that one in particular gets on me. So, any other examples in the room? I've always loved to hear kind of examples of people not understanding emotional intelligence. So, yeah. Yeah. So the question is, how do I deal with that when I see that happening? I am exceptionally hard to rile up. I don't get angry very easily. I get annoyed very easily. But I've, over many years, kind of managed the screaming in my brain that's going on, right, as people are talking, and it can compartmentalize that and deal with that separately. The hard part is when you need to interrupt, right? So if you take the example of you're in an important meeting and someone's dominating the conversation, and the 3 people who need to be talking are starting to turn away, knowing when to stop someone, because you're introducing conflict. After that session, you're going to have a conversation. So I'd say, good luck. I mean, it's hard, but depending on what role you're in, you just need to decide what's worse. Me dealing with this one person after the meeting, or me dealing with an entire room of people who have to get back together again next week because you didn't get where you needed to. But in the end, it takes a lot of patience and willingness to let certain things go for a period of time and then come back after them. Okay. Anyone else? Yes. Yeah, you'll see an example of that coming up, but silence doesn't mean anything, right? It's hard to know what silence means. People not showing up to a meeting, people not on camera. What does that mean? That is very much in play here, and we'll talk about that when we get to the facilitation section. Back.
Sorry, for the people online, I'm very easily riled up. So I find that doing like inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, exhale 4 seconds really helps ground you before saying anything if you're going to intervene, so that you're not coming in too hot with, what they should be doing, or
that's
not
great.
doing.
I'm a practitioner of mindfulness. It was the most painful thing I ever learned to do because, again, my mind's always moving 90 miles an hour. So sitting with yourself, thinking about nothing is really, really hard. But it does go a long ways toward preparing you, right, for difficult situations. So it's back to being self-aware, knowing how you are and finding techniques, especially before you go into a room that might have a difficult conversation, to be ready for it. I think preparation, just like in any situation, can help. All right, let's move on to the next one. Communication and facilitation skills. This, more than anything, I think, is what really makes or breaks a business architect, right? Less so as you move into the executive ranks where you're unlikely to be facilitating meetings, but I know my team spends an awful lot of time doing this. And so it's not just about the one-on-one conversations and talking in meetings, but we facilitate a lot of workshops. And those workshops are absolutely pivotal at the beginning of major projects to get things moving, getting things launched. We actually at Ameriprise have people who are facilitators on our team, right? So we take it that seriously that, especially for big workshops, we have a number of people who really are our primary facilitators. They know they're not business experts, they're not business architecture experts, but they're really good at managing conversations and moving along and achieving the outcomes by the end of the week. So I'd strongly recommend that if you can do it. You may have a team somewhere in your company of facilitators, whether it's in a training organization, that's another place you can kind of lean on. All right, a few things I'll talk about in this space. The first one is storytelling. I heard one of the people on the main stage talk about this, but why was Neil interesting to listen to on Wednesday, right? Was it because he had great slides? He had pretty good slides, yeah. Was it his vast experience? Yeah, he had some really interesting stories. Or was it the way he managed us up and down the flow of a conversation of his life, right? Storytelling. I think we all have seen great storytellers and we've seen some not so good storytellers. But I think you'd probably all agree, you'd much rather sit in a session where someone's telling you stories that you can relate to and understand to keep you engaged versus, right, just rattling through some mundane concepts and trying to memorize them and write them down. So storytelling is I'm not going to call it a hidden talent, but it is something, at least in recent years, I've definitely emphasized for my team members to work on. There's lots of free online things you can do on that. I'll talk about kind of 3 things that are really important to storytelling. And the first one is to bring emotion into it, right? And to talk about things that matter. Going back to Neil on Wednesday, I can imagine Neil having the conversation with himself a week prior to the conference going, okay, great, I get to talk to a bunch of business architects, right? And how do I keep them engaged? And of course, what did he do? He built an entire presentation around architecture as a thing that we all care dearly about. We all work in that field. And so by default, we were interested. Second, he brought emotion into it. He talked about successes. He talked about failures, and we were just kind of waiting for what happened next, right? So that idea of it, if anyone in marketing, right? It's all about emotion, right? It's making people connect. So if you can do that in a conversation, you're going to be doing pretty well. Number 2 is a structure. Ever go to a meeting and you're winding around, you have no idea where it's going. At some point, you're like, why are we here? And you never really quite understand what the point is and how you're getting there. So having a clear structure, sometimes it's easy as agendas and identifying outcomes and all that. The hero's journey is a narrative structure that's been around since forever. And I was introduced to this, I think, back at Cargill days, right? Actually on using this for business storytelling. And this idea that, you start with the hero, you start with a big bad problem, things get worse, someone shows up to help you, you conquer the mountains, everyone, gets confetti and money and increases and everything's great, right? This idea of having this narrative style to get you from beginning to end actually works really, really well. A little bit hypocritically, I am not using that today particularly, which makes me feel a little bit bad, but I couldn't quite fit that in. But storytelling, if you've not done anything formally on storytelling in a business setting, do it. And the final one is don't make it all about yourself. No matter how good you are, right? If you bring other people up to bat with you, it's going to bear more credence. They're going to trust it more. And that's why customer success stories are one of the primary mechanisms that sales organizations use, right? It's not just Dean saying this is a good idea, but it's Dean and this department and this vendor that we're working with and 14 of your closest friends, right? We all think this is a good idea. Much more powerful than Dean saying you should do it this way. So absolutely think about those 3 things as you're starting to weave a story. And again, the context here is now as a business architect, I'm trying to move things into some recommendations. I'm trying to convince, I'm trying to persuade, which we'll get to in a second. The next one, active listening. I'm still a bad listener. I really am, especially at home, as my wife tells me very frequently. So, but the main concept here is listen to understand, not respond. And so some of you might be like me. Again, when someone's talking, my mind is instantly going into, that's right, that's wrong, I do it this way, I do it that way. And I'm already thinking about how I would maybe chime into that conversation and add something. And all the time I'm doing that, I'm not really comprehending the message that's behind that, right? So yeah, again, have you ever gone through a presentation and by the end of it, you're like, you retained very little of it because you were so focused on your own world and how to apply it to what they're thinking versus just like drinking it in, okay? So think about that if you struggle with this one like I do. Spend more time listening than talking. An exercise I do and I encourage people to do is after a meeting, a small meeting, go through every stakeholder in your mind that was there and think about how much time they spent talking versus not talking. Then look at your kind of the intrinsic value of that particular stakeholder to that meeting. Does it line up, right? Are the top 3 people that you think are the most important for this conversation, did they spend the most of the time talking or not? Was the most non-influential person in the room today? So really think about who's dominating the conversations, who's spending that time. And as a facilitator, of course, you can help control that. Pay attention to nonverbal cues. That is, again, a little bit of that mystery, that art. I'm doing that to all of you today, right? I'm seeing people who are slowly working their way to their phones. I'm seeing people who are taking notes, right? I'm seeing people who are diligently making eye contact with me. Nonverbal cues is really super, super important. I've got team members who won't make eye contact with me, even in a one-on-one half the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Yeah, it's okay if you're a 15-year-old, in middle school, but geez, you gotta work on that one. So, all right, we're gonna use this for the next few slides. What do you see here? I can't hear what they're saying, but what can you read from this conversation between, we'll say, a manager and an employee? What do you see? His eyes are a little bit off to the side, right? Now, I'm going to blame Microsoft Copilot for that because I kind of asked it to make him look more concerned, and that's what it gave me. So back to the having a human in the middle who can talk about, yeah, okay. So yeah, he's either intently listening because he's got a good pose, but he is kind of doing a side-eye thing. So what else? That's the primary thing, right? Is she clearly is becoming animated. She's got something concern. She's trying to get it out. So instantly, right, your emotional intelligence should be kicking in, going, okay, this is gonna be a good one. Here we go. let's get ready. Let's start doing some active listening. She didn't bring a lot in. I mean, she's got a blank paper and a notebook, so it's probably all in her head right now. So this could be an emotional discussion, right? So get ready. All right, nonverbal cues. Talked about that a little bit already. Posture, tone, facial expressions, eye contact. What do you see on this one? The old pulls out the phone, starts looking at it, pretending like they're still making, trying to pay attention to it. So another interesting study, and I can't remember the reference to it, is how many of you put your phones on the table when you get into a meeting room with someone? So do I, until I read this article. Because what does that tell people around you? That if that thing goes off, that is more important and will distract me than you. It's why I refuse to buy an Apple Watch, right? I am old school. Why? I don't need to be reminded because I already got phones and laptops reminding me of everything, right? So I don't need any of that. So I would highly recommend, think about, I honestly don't care if your phone's on the table here, so you don't have to, I'll have to put them away. But if you're having an important discussion with someone and your phone's sitting there and things are beeping and it's going off, remember in the old days, you'd probably mute your phone when you had a desk phone? Why aren't we doing that anymore? So it's an important aspect when you're thinking about nonverbal cues. Beth. Ooh. Yes.
Oh, that means you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what you're going to say. So I use that for myself.
Does anyone know what Elon Musk does? He does this. Have you seen this? This is a power stance, right? I've been practicing it for the last few months. Literally, I'm sitting in conference rooms and I'm trying to learn, how do I put the right stance? And what's actually interesting is not only does it kind of look cool, but tactically, it keeps me alert. I'm feeling every finger, so it's actually kind of cool. So lots of research there. I'm not going to go there. So one more in the back. Yeah.
There we go. I know for myself and probably others, we take notes on our phone.
Yep.
Do you have a recommendation rather than coming into a meeting like this, be like, don't worry, I'm taking notes, like how else to address that you might be taking notes, but then also keep it, without being disrespectful?
Yeah, context matters, right? In a big open setting, I'm assuming people are taking notes all the time. If I take notes on paper a lot, sometimes on my phone, sometimes type it in. In a setting like this, I think it matters a little bit less. In a setting where, you're with your boss and your boss's boss, and you keep looking at your phone and you didn't tell them that you're going to be taking notes. So I do know a lot of people who actually literally say, hey, just FYI, maybe before the meeting, stop by and say, hey, I'm going to be taking some notes on here. Let me know if you want to see my notes afterwards. Or even better yet, get meeting transcriptions and have it kick it out for you and not worry about that ever again. Okay. All right, now I'm doing it just on my own. Jeez, I got to stop that. Okay. All right, clear and concise. Ooh. Simple is better, focus on structure, put details in the appendix. Was that Neil? Somebody talked about the appendix thing. Yes, his first board presentation, he brought all his material and they said, it all has to go in the appendix, or maybe it just shouldn't be in here at all, right? And that is a hard-learned lesson that many of us have gone through in our careers. Have you ever had that where somebody pulls up their presentation, you see slide 1 of 94 and you're like, oh, good Lord, here we go. Yeah, there's no excuse for a 90-page presentation for any setting. There just isn't. I do think we put way too much in the appendix. My new tactic is I always have 2 appendices. One is a legit one and one I usually call delete me, all right? and I move things around over the course of prep. And at the end of it, delete me gets deleted and the appendix stays. And it only stays if I need it as a reference during the conversation, right? Or if it will matter to someone who's reading it offline to have some of that in there. Otherwise, how many of you have time to read the appendix of everything sent to you, let alone your emails and your PowerPoints? Nobody cares about your appendix. So that's I think the main lesson here. All right, what do we see in this one? Well, it looks like she brought some more stuff. I'm not sure why we got a calculator. She brought a book. She got her laptop open. We got a bunch of, do think about the context of the conversation you're having, right? If I'm having a one-on-one conversation with a person, how easy is it for you to switch between a laptop screen and papers? And so context switching kills you. And so I would usually say, if you're going to do something like this, you bring one or two easy to digest visuals, and that's it, right? There's just no way. I mean, we've seen some slides in this conference over the last 2 days that there was one yesterday that nobody could read, and it was kind of funny, right? Because we all had those slides, but shouldn't have a slide that nobody can read because nobody's going to read it. And even if you made it a little bigger, it was too many words. So do think about how you can be more clear and concise, unless you have a CFO or someone who loves the details, right? So again, know emotional intelligence, know your target, know your audience, but in most cases, clear and concise works much better. All right. So Jim here is facilitating a workshop with all these business leaders, and he's trying to gain alignment and consensus around his recommendation. All right, what do we see here? Read the room. What was that? All right, we got one guy on the left who clearly is either sleeping or one of those people who actually hears things and then responds. We used to have a CIO at Cargill in the early days who was notorious for in the back of the room, his eyes would close. And then all of a sudden, he'd raise his hand and ask that killer question. You're like, oh crap, right? So again, don't assume necessarily, but clearly if I saw people's eyes going down here, I would target them with a little bit louder, more succinct version of my voice that'll bring them back in. All right, what else? Yes, we got cranky people. Ooh, we got Beth's whatever this is. I don't even know what that is. Yeah. That's actually one of the ones I was looking for. This is the worst possible room arrangement to build consensus with a team of people. You got poor guy in the back who's like, why am I here? They're not even looking at me. Jim's on the side trying to talk to people. What a weird setup. And then you got a bunch of Post-its on the back whiteboard. I don't know. So clearly you could do better facilitating.
Like is he only looking
Yeah.
at the girl who's basically paying interest and ignoring the
Could
rest
be.
of the crowd?
He might just be talking to the one lady in the lower left. As happy, which is a problem though, because everyone else is getting frustrated or falling asleep maybe. All right, Jim is still trying to gain alignment because that last session did not go well for all the reasons we talked about. What do we got going here? I like the seating arrangement, right? I think we all can agree that a round table of some sort where everyone can see each other, everyone's kind of an equal here. What else? Yeah, it's hard to say. I think at least everyone's awake. I don't see any crossed arms, but yeah, it's real. And again, it's hard to tell without seeing a video of it. So the other thing I do like is, oh, dang it, one phone on the table, right? So lady in the white, obviously is interested in seeing what's floating across her screen. Only one laptop open, which is probably the person who's presenting. So clearly this is a much better setup.
Online, we have not on laptops.
Yes. Yep. And again, unless you're taking notes, right? We have meetings in my current place where we all have our laptops open and we're all working on things and we still stay engaged, but you know the alternative, which is somebody just reading their emails, right?
So question, Dean, with Zoom now, you lose a lot of body language. Do you have kind of guidelines around? Oh, you're coming to that. Sorry.
All right, so for virtual meetings, again, this is probably most of our lives. Cameras on if you really want to have an engaging discussions. There's just no alternative, right? If all you're doing is informing people of things and there's 1,800 people on it, probably distracting to have that much on there. But for most of the kind of work we do, probably cameras on. Disable self-view. Does anyone know what that is? How much time does the average person spend on a virtual call like this looking at themselves, their own little window? 40% was the last one I saw. So 4 out of every 10 minutes, you're just looking at yourself and what's happening as you're talking, right? It is, and what's really crazy, try shutting it off. It's terrifying. Even when I do it, I turn it back on just to make sure I don't have something on my face or something, you know. So, but honestly, that's a thing. You'll try it in a meeting and you'll recognize the, oh my gosh, I can't see myself. This is scary. But think about all that time you're spending actually focusing on things and the conversation and active listening. Interactive features like polls and quizzes. Boy, there are some vendors we work with who are just really good at this, right? And they're hosting calls and they're dropping little quizzes and they're making it fun. That is a way to take, you know, some of the monotony out of some of these calls. Breakout rooms are great. In the old days, breakout rooms didn't work well and people got lost and they couldn't come back, but nowadays they tend to work. And for people who don't want to engage with 30 people, but will with 4, you're also going to cater to people who perform better in that type of setting. Storytelling, high quality visuals, yeah, the usual. All right, so just a few more things on communication and facilitation. Invite the right people. Oh my gosh, this every year my team, you know, engagement survey material, right? Is there's too many meetings, right? And every year I tell them the same thing. Don't go to any meetings that aren't valuable. And then the next year, there's too many meetings, right? So, but part of it too is we do need to be a little more conscious about who we're inviting to meetings. In all the work I do, at least once a year, we review every meeting on the calendar and we reassess, is it still necessary? Is it the right length of time? Is it on the right day? Do we have the right attendees? I have started setting up meetings that you can't forward to other people, which at least we can do in our mail system, because what happens? Next thing you know, there's 95 people on a call that was intended for 6, right? So invite the right people, choose the right meeting setting, like we talked about in those examples, share an agenda and expectations, all the usual meeting etiquette stuff, clarify objectives. You can read all that stuff. Again, very typical meeting facilitation things, and there's plenty of good facilitators who knew all this. And again, we actually have expert facilitators do a lot of stuff for us. So
around sharing agendas, anybody in the room even have suggestions for truly sharing productive pre-meeting materials and actually having attendees read them?
Okay, so again, the question is, yeah, so agendas, pre-meeting material. I'll take the pre-meeting material first. I rarely send out pre-meeting material because at least where I work, I know most people will not have time to go read it. If I do, I make it 100% explicit that the expectation is you will be willing to talk about pages 3 and 4 when you walk into the room. You know, I make it red, I bold it, but I generally don't. There are some meetings, you know, especially like board meetings and some of our executive meetings where they do religiously review material ahead of time. So some of it is to know your audience and decide whether it's beneficial. But I try not to expect that. Agendas, I have a love-hate, relationship with agendas. At least a basic one that talks about the structure, so you kind of know where things are going. But at the same time, the last thing I want to see is here's the 17 things on the list, and I'm going to spend the first 5 minutes going through all 17 and asking if you need more agenda items. That's my pet peeve, by the way. So if you didn't notice, I didn't show you an agenda, which I probably should have, but I'm like, the last thing you care about is an agenda. You just want me to be engaging and fun, right? And let's get into this content. So go ahead.
Yeah, I have found that what works for me is it doesn't have to be a formal agenda, but I have adopted my husband's professional rule is no agenda, no attenda. So, so we, like when I send something out, every meeting at least has one sentence that says, this is what the purpose of this is. And if there's an action item, it's just as simple, as direct as possible. direct active language and it's highlighted in yellow. So their eyes are instantly on it. And so they're like, okay, I got to come ready. Otherwise, but I reject meetings that especially come from my team. It's like we include the purpose every time.
I'll echo that. Purpose of meeting is what I care about more than agenda, right? If the agenda gives you the purpose, fine. But ideally, you have both to some extent. But yeah, I mean, I will always support my team members when they say, I don't know why I'm at this meeting. I don't know what's there. I got something else. I'll say, well, go to the one you know about and just tell the person. Don't just not show up either, right? Let that person know. Sometimes you don't have project managers who can help with this stuff, so it can be difficult. But yeah, the last thing I want to do is send out an invite to a bunch of people who don't know why they would be coming to help me with something. All right, covered that one. All right, adaptability. Half-life of skills. I hadn't heard this concept before, but I really like it. So there's another study down here at the bottom, and this guy had some pretty information. This came from the World Economic Forum. It is a few years old, but the concept is if you go back 40 years, the half-life of a new skill, right, was 10 years? Yeah. What does that mean? I'm learning something breaking today, 40 years ago, right? For the next 10 years, I can expect that to be on the upswing. And at 10 years, it's going to start to decline. I'm probably going to have 20 years, though, of being able to leverage that skill. What a great way to spend our training dollars, right? 20 years worth of value. Well, unfortunately, it now is at 4. And that was before AI. And so what they're saying is we think it's probably going to be 2 or maybe even slightly less than 2. So we talked about this in one of the previous sessions about even the books we're reading. And they say, here, you need a man in the middle. You need a person in the middle to kind of govern what's going on. I'm like, and I asked the question, do you really think that's going to last more than 1 to 2 years? They said yes. I disagree. But so all that tells you is you need to be more adaptable at a faster pace than you ever have in your career. It's slightly terrifying as you're getting closer to retirement like me, maybe. But all right. What this really leads to is that as we're hiring people, we do care less about the particular skill unless it's like an engineer, a senior engineer that we're all stealing from each other, right, to go build stuff. But for everybody else like us, your ability to learn and adapt and start to master new skills, the speed you can do that in is what is the most important right now for all the reasons we talked about. Things are changing so dramatically that what you know today may not even be relevant in 2 years. I mean, these are just a few examples, but every company's a digital company now, right? When did that happen, right? It was like in the old days, it was like, okay, IT's here and this is there, but now everybody's a digital company. You've got, Walmart, you've got Unilever, right? These are manufacturing companies who are publishing the state of artificial intelligence. John Deere, egg companies for years now it is more about the tech than anything. I have rich farmer relatives in southern Minnesota. They have $1 million combines and stuff. It's crazy. And they don't do anything. They program the thing, it goes around. They literally play on their phones just in case something goes wrong. But dramatic change. But what I want to talk about now is it's not just AI, right? I think we're all extremely focused on AI right now. I'm kind of not, right? Because I feel like we've got plenty of people focused on AI and we know all kinds of use cases. We're tackling them. And some of you, depending on your role, may also need to start thinking about not just AI, but what else is coming next. And there are some things out there that are kind of mind-blowing, right? I don't even know what half of these are. I know what a few of them are, but I'll just give a few examples. Advanced robotics and automation. We talked about self-driving cars. 2 years ago, I went to a restaurant in northern Minnesota. Me and my wife, there's like 5 people in this dive bar, and a robot brought our food to us 2 years ago. This is so cool, right? They named it. I can't remember what it was named, but basically all food came from the kitchen on a robot that knew the table. They just had to say, deliver this order to this table. Why did they do that? What is one of the biggest constraints in the restaurant industry right now? Labor. They can't hire people, right? Well, they don't have a problem anymore. They actually took probably one whole person's worth of work at least out, bought a robot that's probably already paid for itself. Went to my daughter's college campus and dropped her off after the holidays. There's these little robots flying around campus delivering food orders to people in their dorms. It's insane. And they move fast too. It's not like these slow zombie movie things, right? They're just booking around. And so think about how much that can change almost any business model. So advanced robotics, it's a lot more than what in the past we've talked about with robotics. Digital trust infrastructure, privacy preserving computation. As I was preparing this material, I was doing it from home. Do you know how many times I had to re-authenticate to various things, right? So some of them were sending me texts, some of them were launching my Microsoft Authenticator, and I swear to get anything done now, I have to do that like 7 or 8 times. And you do it wrong once, and then you're in trouble, and then that is the worst customer experience, right? What we're telling our clients they have to do. I mean, every time you log into a bank now, you have to go to your phone. If you don't have your phone, it's upstairs. That's not going to be there for much longer. There are solutions coming in that space. What if you're able to roll those out faster than your competitors and get people truly to a somewhat passwordless environment that is easy to use? So there's other things on here. I guarantee you, especially if you go into ChatGPT and type these in, you'll get a really cool set of answers as to what's coming in them. I won't even go into energy, right? The constraint we have on energy for AI will disappear. It'll be live for some number of years, and it's going to be a real constraint. But when it's not a constraint because we've got renewable energy, as you know, that's cheap, everyone in, let's go. That'll be fascinating. All right, influence and persuasion. I'm just going to dive right to this one. Again, I know somebody else had done a whole session on this one, but Cialdini is probably the best known author in this space, right? So it's got a number of books. That's one in particular. It originally, he had these 6 principles of persuasion. He added a 7th one sometime in the last 5 years, but I really like these in that you can apply them to almost any setting where you're trying to get somebody to do something. Reciprocity, making someone indebted to you, right? You go to the grocery store, they offer you some free food, and then you feel kind of bad that the little person there is like, no, so you buy their thing, right? And in a business setting, this might be a bit more about I help you, you help me, right? Start to build some trust, and that helps you get to a point where they're like, yeah, I trust you, Dean. Just go with it, you're good. Commitment and consistency. By default, you will do the same thing you did last time. That's just human nature. It's why we all sign ethical code of conducts year after year, and why you have to keep doing these things, because that keeps them in the front of your mind. But the same thing applies to subscriptions, right? It's harder to get off of a streaming subscription than to just pay it again for another month, right? And now I have all of them, unfortunately. I can see a lot of stuff, but it's expensive. Social proof and consensus. I talked about that a little bit. Testimonials, right? If somebody else that I look up to, you know, if I like them, you'll see the liking one on there. So expert endorsements. So that's back to the bring people to the fray with you. Don't just go in alone. Know that this person really looks to their senior accountant every time we're talking about money. So make sure they know ahead of time. Scarcity. Boy, we better get going on this right now or we're going to not have the resources to do it. So yes, we stopped and bought a bunch of toilet paper when the pandemic started. And then we sold it to people. It was great. Yeah. And unity. We are influenced by people who are like us, right? Social media, modern politics, right? We are constantly fed with information that matches the way we think about things from people who think like us, which creates polarizing views on things that may or may not actually be the truth. All right, bring it all back together. So the main takeaway here is plan as much time preparing for the presentation and the communication as you do for the content. That tends to be the biggest problem is you're happy to spend 4 hours on a really cool PowerPoint, but are you willing to spend 4 hours practicing it, trying it out? Last night on my drive home from Kincaid's for dinner, I literally did this whole presentation to myself as I drove home. It wasn't very good. Then I had to do more when I got home. I knew I was struggling. I'm like, okay, that isn't good. But especially nowadays too, it's a lot easier to do some of this stuff. And so the best thing is to record yourself, watch yourself back. It's terrifying the first time you do it, but you'll learn things about yourself and your style that you won't know and that people might not be willing to tell you. So that's always the best one. Ask for feedback. especially if you're trying to get better at something. So that person that had that catchphrase they said 24 times every meeting, after every meeting, after I told him that, I sent him a number. I sent him like a direct message that had nothing but 4, and he knew what it meant, right? And then it was like 17 again, and then it was 2, and then it was 0, 0, 0, 0, right? So find someone you trust who can kind of listen in and help guide you. Watch good presenters, right? So when I'm taking notes, I'm often taking notes on things people are doing that I need to emulate, right? So I've got some things that Neil was doing on Wednesday, and like, that was cool. I need to do better at that. And finally, practice. As I said, practice, practice, practice is how you get better at this. So, all right, a couple final slides. So again, Metro State University has a program that's really for professionals like us, right? So kind of people who already have degrees, they're in the workforce, and they just are trying to advance specific professional skills. Back in, what did we say, Beth, 2013, 14, 15, somewhere in there is when we formed the first business architecture certificate course based loosely on the Business Architecture Guild. But what's different is, if any of you have studied for and hopefully passed the Business Architecture Guild certification, it is quasi worthless, right? It's so much intense memorization of what arrow pumps to what arrow on what box. It in no way tells you how to apply it and use it. Okay? This class is applied business architecture. It's case study based. It's taught by myself and a few others that have been in the workforce being business architects for a long time. And so most of it is conversational. We give a lot of examples. So we do about one a year right now. And so we have another one coming up on March 19th. This isn't easy necessarily. Are we at 14 sessions, Beth? So it's 14 sessions. There's 6 to 9 spread out over the course of a few months. So it's always catered to people who come home from work and then spend some time on the phone with me and others. But I guarantee you'll walk out of this with a whole lot better understanding. So especially if you're new to business architecture or really just trying to figure out ways to help get it into your company more, a certification like this goes a long ways. Metro also does a lot of just free webinars. And so if you're not on their list, get on their list. One of my peers is doing this one coming up on January 21st, Organizing Chaos. That always sounds fascinating. So that's what I've got for today. Any questions or follow-ups? Yes.
Thank you. I would just say the facilitating one resonates with me because I just went through this whole project that took 9 months of my life, and it was the most fulfilling, rewarding thing I've ever worked on with my company thus far. But to do that, the facilitating was like the heart and soul of that, like customized workshops, brand new frameworks, doing things we had never done before. Nobody on our team had ever done before, coming up with new stuff all the time. The one thing that made the difference with that wasn't just preparing how to speak to it and verbally guide people through it, but we literally, every time we had a workshop, the whole 2, sometimes 3 days prior, we were physically in the room walking the workshop. So it's not just, it can't be just about how you're going to talk about the content. I can't recommend enough, if you can carve the time out to prepare, physically manipulating the papers, the pages, the walks, how you transition between your co-facilitators can make or break the success of how your people experience your delivery.
I love that. I love that. I think obviously ratchet it to the importance of the meeting, right? If you're getting some business leaders in and you're going to have one shot, you better well say, all right, I got 4 hours. I'm not going to get that again. We're going to practice this thing. So again, apply it at the right ratio to the importance of the meeting. Good. All right. I'm around for the rest of the day and tomorrow. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been such a great series of presentations and conversations, some really good speakers. I just wanted to do one quick plug on the Metro State course. I did that course back in 2016. Beth was in my class, and my instructor was Linda, along with Pat Solaski and Mandy. It was a good time. It is quite an investment of time, but it is well worth it. You will absolutely develop relationships. And I don't think I would have met Linda had I not been in that class. And here I am today. So if you have the capacity or the time or the wants or desire, it's a pretty amazing course that was put together. So thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Go ahead and have your bio breaks, and we'll see you in the main stage area for our final keynote for the day. Thank you.